What's going on, guys? Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry that I've been gone for a couple of days, but life strikes, and here we are with another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Sony FX3, which is a camera that I said that I wasn't going to get, but actually I'm really glad I got it, and the Sony A7S3, because I don't know if you remember in my past videos, I didn't find the point on getting a camera that has exactly the same features as the Sony A7S3, and that it is a little bit more expensive. Well, to be honest with you, I was wrong because I got to shoot with this camera for a day and I just fell in love. And I really feel that this camera complements all the other cameras that I have, including the Sony A7S3. So if you don't own any of these cameras and you've been trying to decide between one of these two cameras, or if you already own a Sony A7S3 and you're looking for an additional camera, well, this video is also for you. So stick around, all that information coming right up. Get started right here. So we're going to be comparing the Sony FX3 versus the Sony A7S3, and like I mentioned before, they are identical when it comes to specs, but there may be a camera that you're going to prefer one over the other one, and we're going to talk about that right now. Now, before I continue, I want to tell you that I'm giving away a brand new Xeon Crane 2S gimbal, and all you have to do to enter, super simple, read the rules, subscribe to the channel. The announcement is going to happen on April 5th. I'm also going to be listing all the details down in the description. Good luck to all of you guys. So we have done a lot of videos talking about the Sony A7S3. I don't want to bore you guys, so I'm going to omit a lot of the things about this camera and just talk about the new kid on the block, which is the Sony FX3. So, like I was mentioning before, you know, there are a lot of things that are very similar between both cameras, especially when it comes to specs. They're going to be identical, but you may want to opt for this camera if you are a type of shooter like myself that likes to kind of like carry minimal gear. The reason why I'm saying this is because the Sony FX3 feature a boxier design, and when you look at both cameras side to side, you can actually tell what I'm talking about. We're missing the EBF right here, but for a lot of, you know, video shooters like myself, you know, we rely most of the time on external monitor to gauge, you know, manual focus or, you know, properly nail the exposure. So the Sony FX3, in my opinion, is a better design because, you know, it allows you to mount a lot of things right on the body without the need of an additional cage. Now, I remember when I wanted to rig up my Sony A7S3, I had to wait for a few months until a cage was available, and I think, you know, at the time of this video, I think the case is exactly the same for this camera. But the good thing is that I started shooting with this camera with external monitor, handles, you know, lavaliers, and a bunch of other stuff that I put in the camera right away because I was able to mount them right here. So let me just, you know, walk you through the mounting options that you have. Number one, you're gonna have the hot shoe mount, which right here, you're gonna be able to mount the handle that comes with the XLR module that we're gonna talk in just a moment. You're also gonna have additional screws that, you know, you can actually opt to mount additional accessories. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that when you put the handle here, you're gonna also occupy these two screws, so you're only left with one screw right here on the side, something to keep in mind. But you also have screws on the side of the camera on both sides, and obviously one in the bottom for the tripod mount. So in my opinion, these boxier designs are a little bit better than something more like the Sony A7 III or A7S3 that has the EBF because it allows you to keep the rigging, you know, to its minimum. Now, this is gonna be a great deal if you're planning to fly this camera on a gimbal. In my opinion, you know, I'd much rather go with something a little bit boxier than something like this on a gimbal, even though the weight of both cameras is going to be pretty much the same, and I mean without the lens. So, you know, when it comes to that, you're not gonna get anything else, but in my opinion, this camera feels a little bit more ergonomics, you know, easy to hold. And one of the things that I really like a lot over the Sony A7S3 is the fact that we have more customization right here on the buttons. We have more buttons than on the Sony A7S3, and also the labeling, you know, from factory makes a lot more sense, and it is very similar to the way I customized my Sony A7S3. Now, I'm talking about the labeling right here of the D-pad. For example, that you're gonna find options such as the display, another one for the shutter, peaking, and the zebra. So It says it right there on the camera, and especially for me, someone that shoots with other Sony cameras and even Canon cameras, you know, a lot of the times you just kind of don't remember where you set things up. So this to me is actually really good and very efficient. Now there's another button right down here that I really love, and you know, I just happen to find this button a lot easier to press than trying to nail this button right here. Obviously, you're gonna have to actually look you know, at the top of the camera to find the movie record button, because you have other options here. But finding this button, you know, I can just do it like this, and I know that I'm only gonna be pressing the record on or off. Now, when it comes to the ports that this camera offer, no difference right here. You're gonna find exactly the same thing that you have in the Sony A7S III. But one thing that you have right here that you don't have in the Sony A7S III is that on the XLR module, you're gonna have 2 XLR inputs and also an additional 3.5 millimeters. And you also have redundancy right here in the event that you don't wanna use the handle and you wanna use, you know, another 3.5 millimeters. So I think that that is actually really, really nice. Now, one of the things that you're gonna find in abundance in the Sony FX3 that you don't have in the Sony A7S III is the amount of tally lights that you have all around the camera. So when you hit record, this camera lights up on fire. So you have one light at the front, the button actually lights up as well. You want one on the back, and you also have a rectangle that turns in red all around the perimeter of the screen. So how many times have I actually thought that I was recording just to find out after 30 minutes or whatever time to realize that I never pressed the button, or I didn't press the button, you know, hard enough? Well, with this camera, that's never gonna happen, because, you know, you're gonna realize one way or the other. Now let's talk about another feature that we have in the Sony FX3 that we don't have in the Sony A7S III, and that one is gonna be fans. This camera, being a cinema camera, has fans to keep the camera cool, so you can actually record for unlimited amount of time. And I think I read somewhere in the Sony website that up to 13 continuous hours of recording. I mean, that is more than anyone can actually hang out right next to a camera. But the Sony A7S III also claims to have unlimited recording options if you bypass the temperature warning. And to be honest with you, that is true, but you are gonna get the warning at some point, because it did happen to me that I was shooting a video at a kitchen and it was very hot in there, and we got the warning a couple of times. The camera never turned off, but it's something that kind of like I don't even want to see popping, especially when you're doing a video for a client. Now with this camera, because it has active cooling system, meaning that it has fans, you know, you're not gonna have that problem. And if you're trying to get a camera to do, for example, a lot of, you know, interview work, well, I don't think that I'll be so confident on the Sony A7S III, because I may be afraid that, you know, that warning may pop in the middle of the recording. With this camera, peace of mind. Let's talk about the ergonomics when running and gunning with both cameras, and I'm talking about the bare bones body and a lens. Now both cameras are gonna have a similar ergonomic, and everything is gonna be pretty much, you know, the same, the way the camera handles. But in my opinion, the Sony FX3 has a much more comfortable grip. It's a little bit deeper, if I'm not mistaken, and because the camera is a little bit bulkier, you know, I just feel more secure in my hand. Now things are gonna change, and we're gonna get advantage, you know, towards the Sony FX3 when we wanna include, you know, XLR inputs in here, because this camera comes with the handles that actually has a built-in XLR module. So simply put the handle right here, and you're gonna gain the handle, the XLR module, everything built into one unit without the need of any cables. Now you can accomplish the same in the Sony A7S III by purchasing the XLR module that Sony sells, but the setup is gonna be a little bit bulkier, and at that time, if you're planning to include a handle, which is probably something that you're gonna wanna do because you're gonna have that top thing here throwing off the way, then you are gonna have to also put a cage in the camera. So when it comes to that, you know, my vote goes for the Sony FX3, and probably one of the reasons why I'm picking up more this camera than anything else. But enough of the talk, and let's actually talk about who are these two cameras for, because there's been a lot of confusion. Now, let me break it down to my opinion, who I think the perfect user for both cameras are. If you're a content creator that does 50% photography and 50% video, well, the Sony A7S III is going to be a clear winner right here, even though the Sony FX3 also features, you know, photography features, right? But this camera has a proper EVF. It is designed around a still body because, you know, it is actually like a Sony A7R4 or A7 III body. So all the bonds arrangement, the ergonomics, the EVF are more suited for photographers, where this one the number one thing that you are gonna see here is that you don't have an EVF and you're gonna rely solely on the screen, and also the button distribution is a little bit more of a pain for photography than it is for video. This camera is clearly designed for video work. The distribution of the buttons, you know, the modularity of the body, the squareness of the body is thought for a cinematographer. Now, if you're someone that does kind of like me, now I'm doing more video work than photography, believe it or not, or someone that does 80% video and 20% photography, or 70-30, then I say go with this camera, because you're really gonna enjoy and take advantage of the video features that you have, like more custom buttons, you know, the modularity and capability of installing, you know, more stuff to the camera without having to put a cage, and you know, the list goes on. So you're also gonna save money if you go for the Sony A7S3, you know, if you are someone that does 50 and 50. Now this camera is gonna go for $3,500 versus this camera that's gonna cost you $3,900. But remember, the additional $400 are gonna give you a lot more than if you have to go and buy those items separately. You get an included handle with the XLR module right there. And if you want to go and buy the XLR module, I think you're going to end up paying around $600. And if you also want to put a handle in the Sony A7S3, you are going to need to put a cage first and then, you know, buy a handle. So at that point, you're going to end up spending more money with the Sony A7S3 all rigged up than actually going with the Sony FX3 that already brings everything included in the box. So guys, you know, there's a lot more to say about these cameras. You know, this is just kind of like the synopsis, you know, comparison, bare bones, comparison, straightforward. But if you have a particular question, make sure to drop them down below. I'll do my best to answer all the questions you may have, and stay tuned for my FX3 versus FX6 video. Until then, I will see you in the next video. Take care.